At a wedding meant to celebrate love, one slap will set in motion a chain of events no one saw coming. What Sophia does next will shock them all. Sophia, a 22-year-old maid, had been working for the Montgomery family for the past 2 years. Despite her humble beginnings, she had found some comfort in the large mansion serving the Montgomerys. She was pregnant and had kept the news a secret, afraid that the wealthy family would find out and cast her aside. Her life had always been a series of struggles, living in the shadow of her employer's opulence and trying to hide her vulnerability. Lily Montgomery, the wife of the powerful billionaire Alexander Montgomery, was everything Sophia wasn't: rich, glamorous, and the center of attention. Lily had always been insecure about her marriage, particularly about the attention her husband gave to the staff. There was a quiet rivalry between her and Sophia, who, despite being a servant, seemed to capture the gaze of everyone around her with her quiet grace and beauty. The wedding day should have been one of happiness, but for Sophia, it became a nightmare. As the elegant ballroom buzzed with excitement, Lily's jealousy simmered, and she couldn't stand the thought of her husband's attention wandering to anyone else. With a sudden fit of rage, Lily slapped Sophia across the face in front of the guests, a public humiliation that would change everything for both women. The slap echoed through the ballroom, its sharp sound a stark contrast to the soft murmur of the guests. Sophia stood frozen, her cheek burning from the sting of Lily's slap. The room had gone silent. The glimmering chandeliers above, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, everything came to a halt as the humiliation of a young maid unfolded in front of the most influential people in the city. Sophia's hands trembled, but she didn't let her emotions show. She had become too accustomed to pain, to being dismissed and underestimated, but never like this, never in front of an audience. Lily's eyes were cold, her expression a mixture of disgust and control. She had done this before, humiliated Sophia in private, subtly undermining her every chance she got. But this was different. This was deliberate. This was power. The wedding was meant to be a day of celebration, yet Lily had turned it into an arena, with Sophia as her target. Alexander stood beside his bride, his face unreadable. His eyes, though, lingered a moment too long on Sophia. Was it guilt? Sympathy? It was hard to say, but in that fleeting moment, Sophia saw something in his gaze, a recognition, maybe even an apology. Or perhaps it was her own wishful thinking. As the guests nervously exchanged glances, unsure of how to react, Sophia gathered her composure. The room held its collective breath, waiting for her to break, for her to collapse into tears, or, worse yet, flee the scene. But Sophia did neither. She stood tall, her back straight, fighting the sting of her pride and the wave of hurt that threatened to overwhelm her. For a brief moment she considered running out of the ballroom, escaping the suffocating humiliation. But then she thought of her unborn child. She had promised herself she would never let her situation define her, no matter how hard life got. She wasn't going to let Lily or anyone else control her. Not now, not ever. The guests were watching, waiting for the next move in the drama unfolding before them. They expected her to flee, to scream, or to beg for mercy. But Sophia wasn't the type to make a scene. She wasn't going to give Lily that satisfaction. With an almost eerie calm, Sophia set the tray down on a nearby table, each motion deliberate, each step forward calculated. She looked at Lily, who still held her head high, her lips curled in a faint smirk. The crowd was hushed, the air thick with anticipation. And then, without a word, Sophia turned on her heels and walked toward the door. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. For the first time in years, she felt something inside her shift, a quiet but fierce resolve. But what did that slap really mean? Why had Lily reacted so violently? Was it just jealousy, or was there something deeper? Something that Sophia didn't yet understand, but was about to unravel. As she stepped outside into the cool night air, her breath ragged, Sophia realized that this was far from over. Lily's slap had been more than an act of rage. It was a spark that would ignite a chain of events, and Sophia had no idea just how deep the secrets ran within the Montgomery family. But she was about to find out, and what she would discover would change everything. For the first time in her life, Sophia wasn't just a passive observer. She was about to take control of her own destiny. The cold air outside did nothing to ease the sudden storm that was brewing within Sophia. She stepped away from the mansion, feeling the weight of the moment settle in her chest. The grandeur of the wedding, the whispers of the guests, and the glaring humiliation she had just endured were like an unbearable weight on her shoulders. But she couldn't turn back. She wouldn't. As she walked away from the venue, her heart raced, not just from the physical exertion, but from the turmoil that had been stirred inside her. She had been nothing but a servant, an invisible figure in the Montgomerys' grand life. But today, something had changed. That slap, Lily's calculated cruelty, had triggered something deep inside her, a defiance she didn't know she had. What had started as a moment of public degradation was turning into a turning point, one that would forever alter the balance of power in that house. Sophia didn't go home immediately. She couldn't. The urge to escape the suffocating weight of the mansion, the glances of sympathy from the staff, and the undeniable truth of her own vulnerability was too overwhelming. Instead, she went to a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, a place she frequented in her rare moments of solitude. It was there that she met Mark, a childhood friend who had always been a quiet support for her. Mark had always known about her struggles, though he wasn't fully aware of the depth of her pain. But today he saw it in her eyes. "Tell me what happened," Mark said, his voice low and concerned, as he poured her a cup of coffee. Sophia hesitated, but then began to tell him everything, about the slap, about Lily's jealousy, and about Alexander's strange reaction. But it wasn't just the slap that haunted her, it was the way Alexander had looked at her, how the brief moment of connection in his eyes had made her question everything. She wasn't the type to believe in romantic fantasies, not in her line of work. But the way he had observed her, it had felt different from the usual patronizing glances the rich often gave their servants. Mark listened intently, his expression serious. "Sophia, you know that wedding was about more than just a celebration. Lily's hatred of you runs deep. She's not just jealous of your looks, she's threatened by something you represent. Maybe it's the fact that you're real. You're a person, not just a maid." Sophia sighed, looking down at her coffee. "But why does it matter? I've always been invisible to them, Mark. That's all I've ever been. A servant. The slap. It made it real, though. I can't keep pretending anymore, but I don't know what to do next." Mark leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "You have choices now. You don't have to be afraid of her anymore. You know more than you think about their world. If you want, you can turn this around, take back your power." Sophia looked at him, her thoughts swirling. What did he mean? Take back her power? She had always been afraid of losing her job, of being discarded like so many other maids who had overstayed their welcome in the Montgomery mansion. But today, something inside her had cracked. The years of silence, of hiding her true self, those were over. Just then, Mark's words sank in. "Sophia, you're not just anyone. You have a secret that can shake their world to its core." The words hit her like a bolt of lightning. She'd always been careful to keep the truth about her pregnancy hidden. Only a few people knew about it, Mark being one of them. But if she had the courage to expose the truth, it could force Lily and Alexander into a corner. It could turn the tables, shift the balance of power. Sophia's heart pounded in her chest. The idea of confronting the Montgomerys with the truth was terrifying, but something in her felt ready. She had been pushed too far. The humiliation she'd endured earlier had only made her realize that her silence was no longer a shield. Mark reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've always been strong, Sophia. You have the power to decide what happens next." Sophia took a deep breath, her mind racing. The stakes had never been higher. What she did now would determine everything. It was time to stop being afraid and start taking control. She knew Lily wouldn't stop at a slap, and if she didn't act soon, the Montgomerys would continue to pull the strings, controlling her fate. But what if the truth could change everything? As the tension in her chest built, Sophia's decision became clear. She was going to expose the secret she had hidden for so long. She was going to make sure that Lily Montgomery would never feel comfortable again, that she would never again have the upper hand. The Montgomerys might have everything, but Sophia was ready to take the one thing they couldn't control, the truth. It was time to fight back. Sophia stood before the mansion once again, her heart thudding in her chest. The decision had been made. The truth she had guarded for so long, the secret she had feared revealing, was now the key to her future. With each step she took toward the front doors, the weight of the moment pressed on her. She had always been an invisible figure in the grand story of the Montgomery family, but today that was going to change. The hallway inside was eerily silent, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. She had been inside this mansion 1,000 times, serving meals, cleaning rooms, and performing tasks like an invisible shadow. But today was different. Today she wasn't just the maid. Today she was someone with power. Sophia made her way to the grand staircase where Lily stood waiting. The wedding had ended hours ago, but Lily, in her pristine white dress, still held herself like a queen. The flicker of an arrogant smile crossed her lips when she saw Sophia approach, but it quickly faded when she noticed the look in Sophia's eyes. It wasn't fear. It wasn't submission. It was defiance. "I thought you'd run off, ashamed of yourself," Lily sneered. "But here you are, standing in front of me like some hero. You think your little stunt in the ballroom means anything? You're nothing but a servant." Sophia took a step forward, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "You're right, I am a servant, but I'm not your servant anymore." Lily laughed, the sound cold and sharp. "What are you going to do? Tell the world how you've been mistreated? No one cares about a poor pregnant maid. You're just a stain on this family's reputation." Sophia took a deep breath, the words she had rehearsed in her mind for so long finally coming to the surface. "You're wrong. I'm not going anywhere, Lily, and I'm not afraid of you." Lily's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer to Sophia, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you can take me down? You think anyone will believe you over me? I'm married to Alexander, the man who holds the strings of this entire family. What do you have? A broken past and a child that isn't even his." The words hit Sophia like a slap, but she didn't flinch. This time she was in control. The truth was in her hands, and she was about to wield it. "Maybe it isn't his child," Sophia said quietly, her voice unwavering, "but it is someone's, and I'm not going to let you continue to treat me like nothing." Lily's smug expression faltered. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, stepping back slightly, clearly unsettled by the shift in Sophia's demeanor. Sophia felt the stir of adrenaline coursing through her veins as she took another step forward. "You've spent years belittling me, demeaning me, using your power to control every aspect of my life. But there's one thing you don't know. There's one thing I've kept hidden from everyone, even from you." Lily's face twisted in confusion, her composure cracking for the first time. "What are you going on about? If you think you can manipulate me with some sob story about your child, you're gravely mistaken." Sophia's heart pounded. She was standing on the edge of a precipice. There was no turning back now. "The child I carry isn't just anyone's, it's Alexander's." The silence that followed was deafening. Lily's face went pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. Sophia could see the shock ripple through her, a storm brewing beneath the surface. The words had landed, and now there was no going back. Lily stepped back, her hands shaking. You're lying," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Sophia didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth was undeniable. Lily had been so consumed with her jealousy, with her need to control, that she had never once considered the possibility that her husband had once shared something more than just a passing glance with the maid, that her actions, her cruelty, had driven Sophia to a place where she was now ready to reveal everything. "I'm not lying," Sophia said, her voice thick with emotion. "And now it's time for you to face the consequences of your actions. I'm done being your pawn, Lily. I'm done hiding." Lily, still in shock, staggered backward, her eyes wild. "You think anyone will believe you? You think anyone will care about the truth? I will destroy you." Sophia stood tall, her body rigid with strength. "You've already tried, but now it's your turn to face the consequences." The tension in the air was thick, electric. The weight of the truth hung heavy between them, and for the first time, Sophia felt a sense of peace. She had no idea what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't backing down anymore. The ball was in her court now, and she was ready to play. The game had only just begun. The days that followed Sophia's revelation were filled with uncertainty. She had expected some form of retaliation from Lily, but the events that transpired shocked her to her core. As soon as she had left the mansion, her phone had started buzzing incessantly, but it wasn't Mark or anyone who cared. It was the Montgomerys' lawyer demanding an urgent meeting. The quiet days of working in the mansion and avoiding confrontation seemed like distant memories. Sophia now found herself at the center of a storm. Alexander had been silent since the truth about the child had come to light. He hadn't called, hadn't even attempted to explain the situation. The only communication she had received was a cold, formal invitation to meet with the Montgomerys' legal team. The weight of everything was too much. Was Alexander going to disown her and the child? Would Lily use her wealth and connections to destroy her? At the meeting, she sat in a sterile, windowless room, surrounded by cold metal furniture and sharp, impersonal faces. The lawyer's tone was condescending, though he wore a facade of politeness. "Sophia, we know you're upset," he began, "but you need to understand that revealing a personal matter like this is not only damaging to your reputation, but also harmful to the family's public image. We suggest you quietly step away from this situation. If you do so, we'll ensure you and your child are taken care of." The words stung, but Sophia remained composed. She had expected the Montgomerys to try and sweep things under the rug. They always had. It was the way the wealthy operated, and she had been a part of that world long enough to understand the rules. But this time, they had underestimated her. "I'm not here to be bought," Sophia said firmly, her voice steady but sharp. "This isn't about money. It's about respect. And if you think I'll just disappear because of your threats, you're gravely mistaken." The lawyer leaned forward, his expression changing. "You don't have a choice, Sophia. We've already begun the process of legally distancing Alexander from you and your child. If you make this public, there will be consequences." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. This was worse than she had imagined. They weren't just threatening her. They were attempting to erase the existence of her child, erasing her from the family entirely. The thought of her baby growing up in a world where it was denied its father was unbearable. Lily's cruel face flashed in her mind. The jealousy, the disdain, the smug feeling of superiority that had driven her to slap Sophia at the wedding, to humiliate her. It wasn't just about the child. It was about power, control, and her own insecurities. Lily had always felt threatened by the fact that Alexander had once looked at Sophia in a way that was different from how he looked at her. Maybe it was love, maybe just a fleeting moment of connection, but it was enough to make Lily feel betrayed. The lawyer's words continued to echo in her mind, but it wasn't just his voice she heard, it was Lily's. The smug tone from that wedding day, the mockery, the cruel slaps that had started as private humiliations and escalated into public attacks. Sophia's blood boiled. She had been living in fear for too long, believing that the Montgomerys had the power to control her every move. But she was wrong. As the meeting ended, the lawyer handed her a stack of legal papers. "Sign these," he instructed coldly, "and we'll take care of everything. You'll never have to worry again." Sophia looked down at the papers, her hands shaking as she held them. They were a lie, an attempt to erase her from Alexander's life and her own. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. Signing them would be easy. It would mean safety, a future without the chaos of the Montgomerys, but it would also mean surrender. And she wasn't ready to surrender. She stood up abruptly, the papers slipping from her hands to the floor. "I'm not signing anything." The lawyer's face tightened in frustration, but Sophia didn't back down. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to be intimidated into silence. She wasn't going to let Lily's cruelty or Alexander's indifference dictate her life any longer. Walking out of the meeting, Sophia's resolve hardened. She had no more illusions about the Montgomerys. They had the money, the power, the connections, but what they didn't have was control over her anymore. The moment she stepped out into the cold, gray street, Sophia felt the weight of everything she had been carrying for so long begin to shift. The world around her might have been dark, uncertain, and cruel, But there was a light inside her now, one that had ignited with her decision not to back down. She had a child to protect, and she wouldn't let anyone take that from her. As she walked away from the meeting, her mind raced. She could fight back, expose the truth, and face the consequences, or she could walk away from it all, live a quiet life, and raise her child away from the chaos. The Montgomerys would keep their secrets, but Sophia would find her own way. The choice was hers now, and as the sound of her footsteps echoed in the empty streets, she knew she wouldn't be walking away in silence. She had a future to fight for, and she was done being afraid. The crisis had become her turning point. The stakes were higher than ever, but so was her resolve. She was no longer a passive player in this game. She was going to win this war. The moment Sophia walked out of the lawyer's office, the weight of her decision began to settle over her like a heavy fog. The Montgomerys had always held the power, always controlled the narrative, but no longer. She had always seen herself as small, a servant in their world, but today something inside her had shifted. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was a mother, a woman with her own sense of dignity, and she had a story that needed to be told. The decision wasn't easy. The world she had known for years was crumbling, the familiar walls of the Montgomery mansion no longer a place of safety. She had spent her entire life working to stay invisible, to stay beneath the radar, but now, standing on the precipice of everything she'd fought for, Sophia knew she couldn't remain silent any longer. The Montgomerys had tried to erase her, tried to silence her, and most painfully, they had tried to erase her child. That was the moment when the true transformation began. She didn't go home immediately. Instead, she went to the one place that had always given her comfort, a small, quiet park near her apartment. She sat on a bench, her hands resting on her stomach, feeling the gentle flutter of her baby inside her. The baby, who had become the symbol of everything she had tried to protect, was now her reason to fight. She closed her eyes, letting the cool breeze wash over her, the sound of children playing in the distance soothing her racing thoughts. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to think clearly, to embrace the reality that lay ahead. The Montgomerys had money, influence, and power, but they didn't have her will. Sophia's fingers traced the edge of the letter she had received earlier, the one from the Montgomery lawyer. The words on the paper were nothing but threats, empty promises to make her disappear. But Sophia could feel something stirring within her. She wasn't going to be erased. Not this time. Not when her child's future was at stake. She couldn't afford to back down anymore. A fire that had been smoldering inside her for years, ever since her first day at the Montgomery mansion, when she was just a scared young girl, was now fully ignited. The fear she had lived with, the constant need to stay in the background, to blend in with the walls, those were gone. She was no longer afraid of losing everything. What had she really had to lose anyway? She had already been treated as less than human. They had seen her as disposable. Sophia stood up from the bench, the decision crystallizing in her mind. She had already spent so much time apologizing for her existence, for her choices, for the way the Montgomerys viewed her. But that time was over. She was going to take control, not just for herself, but for her child. She was going to fight for the future that had been ripped away from her. Without hesitation, she pulled out her phone and dialed the number of a trusted journalist she knew from the local newspaper. She had met him once when he had visited the mansion to cover a charity event. He was kind, professional, and had always shown interest in the stories behind the wealthy families. She hadn't thought of him until now, but in that moment it felt like the right decision. "Hello?" the voice on the other end of the line answered. "It's Sophia," she said, her voice steady. "I need your help. I have a story that needs to be told." Her words rang out, a declaration of intent, a commitment to the truth, the words she had kept buried deep within her for so long. The pain, the humiliation, the secrets were now out in the open. She was no longer just the maid. She was a woman with a voice, with a truth that needed to be heard. She was taking back control of her narrative. As she hung up the phone, a wave of relief washed over her. She had made the choice. There was no turning back now. The battle would be fierce. The Montgomerys wouldn't go down without a fight. But she wasn't afraid. For the first time in her life, she was standing on her own 2 feet, her backbone straight, her heart full of fire. Sophia had made her decision. She was done being afraid of the consequences. She was going to expose the Montgomerys for who they truly were: corrupt, cruel, and manipulative. She would make sure the world knew the truth. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about breaking free, about freeing herself from the shackles of the Montgomerys' control. And most importantly, it was about securing a future for her child, a future where they could both live on their own terms, free from the influence of the family who had tried to destroy them. The transformation was complete. Sophia was no longer just the maid. She was a force to be reckoned with, and nothing, no one could stand in her way now. The days following Sophia's decision were the most intense of her life. The Montgomerys fought back with everything they had: lawyers, threats, and even public smear campaigns aimed at discrediting her. But Sophia stood firm. She had already taken the first step by telling her story to the journalist, and soon the truth about the Montgomerys' cruelty was spreading like wildfire. The press had latched onto the scandal, and the public reaction was swift. People rallied behind her, voicing their support, outraged by how she had been treated. The Montgomerys' carefully crafted image began to crack. Lily in particular seemed rattled, her usual calm demeanor replaced by frantic, desperate moves to salvage what was left of her reputation. Alexander, however, remained mostly silent. His indifference hurt Sophia the most. She had once believed in him, in his charm, and in the promise of something more. But his refusal to stand by her, to acknowledge the truth, only reinforced her decision to stand alone. Finally, after months of legal battles and media frenzy, the Montgomerys were forced to settle. Sophia's story was heard, and the truth about the child was no longer something to be hidden or denied. She walked away from the mansion, not defeated, but empowered. She had reclaimed her life, and in the process had secured a future where her child would grow up with pride. The emotional weight that had once crushed her was now replaced with a sense of peace. She had fought for herself, for her dignity, and for the truth, and in the end, she emerged victorious.